Okay, vino Adonai Eloheinu aleinu ma'aseh adenu konena aleinu ma'aseh adenu koneu. First, I'd like to thank the gracious hostess for this wonderful, wonderful situation for Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the month of miracles, Nisan from the language of Nisim. I want to thank Rachel Malka for graciously opening our house for Rosh Chodesh Shiur.
Ladies, welcome.
And I have to say, whenever you guys ready, I have to say that when I'm looking at Baruch Hashem, all these ladies here, I say to myself, the first thing when I sat down, I said to myself, I right now am looking at the reason why the redemption is going to happen. And why? Again, I'll make it very simple. Just like we were redeemed because of Nashim Tzadkaniyot the first time around, yes? Be'ezrat Hashem, it looks very, very likely that we're going to be redeemed very, very soon, also because of Nashim Tzadkaniyot. So thank you so much for coming, and hopefully I know I'm following up on someone who spoke very well. So I want to make sure that I do as good of a job as I can on behalf of the men that are not the ones who the redemption is going to happen because of them. So first, why is it so important? We have a very unique mitzvah on Pesach, the mitzvah of the Haggadah. On Sukkot, is there a mitzvah to tell the story of the redemption? No. On Shavuot, is there a mitzvah to tell the story of Ma'amad Har Sinai, which arguably is one of the greatest miracles that happened to the Jewish people, one of the greatest revelations of God that's ever happened in the world? Is there a mitzvah to tell the story of Ma'amad Har Sinai? No. But on Pesach, we have a mitzvah from the Torah, mitzvah aseh from the Torah, positive commandment, to tell the Haggadah, to tell your children about Pesach. And why is Pesach unique? Why should it be different than any other holiday? For instance, on Pesach at night, we learn that you have to have matzah. Yes, we know one of the mitzvot aseh on the Seder night from the Torah is to have a kezait of matzah. Minimal, better is to have a kabetzah, which is 2 ounces. By the way, Passover is a very egalitarian holiday. Women are included in all the mitzvot of the Seder night. It's not like on Sukkot where, I'm going to sit inside, the weather's not so good, it's cold, there's a lot of bugs, I'm going to let my husband do the trick in the Sukkah, and I'm going to go in the comfort of my own home. That's okay on Sukkot. But on Pesach, that's not how it works. The ladies are obligated in all the mitzvot of the Seder night, just like the men. The matzah, the maror, when there's Korban Pesach. So for all you vegetarians out there, when the temple is built, there's one time a year you're not a vegetarian. Okay? All right, well, see, God is telling you when the Mashiach comes and we rebuild the temple, the vegetarian part, once a year, you have to break the vegetarian part, and that's on the Seder, where you have to have a kezayit of Korban Pesach. Be'ezrat Hashem, that'll happen this year. So we understand. So what makes Pesach so special? Okay, you could say it's the holiday of redemption. Okay, maybe so. We have another holiday, a holiday of redemption. It's Purim, and interestingly enough, on Purim, there is a story to be told on Purim. It's called the Megillah. And women, of course, were obligated in that one as well. Yes? Af hen hayu to be'ones. I love that statement of the rabbis. Af hen hayu be'oto hanes, which means even they were included in the miracle. Now, let's think about that for a second. On Purim, even though they were included in the miracle? Hello? The book is called Esther. It's not called Mordechai. It's called Esther. Af hen hayu be'oto hanes. It's almost like saying it's as if they were they're not parenthetical. They were essential to the miracle. On Pesach, we understand we were redeemed because of righteous women. If we look at the beginning of Sefer Shmot, which begins to tell us about the redemption, what is the first thing Sefer Shmot discusses after it finishes off with the generation that is past? It tells us about the women, Hamiyaladot ha'ivriot, that the women had more Yirat Shamayim of Paro. They didn't fear Paro as much as they feared Hashem. Very different, however, than the men. Where do we see the failure of the men? When Moses went to Paro, he first went to the Zekenim. which were the men, and he said, it's time for the redemption. They're all excited. They're ready to go. Moshe showed them the miracles. And then what happened is by the time he got to Paro, there were no men around because they kept falling off. They can't, I have something else to do today. Thank you. I got my wife is calling me. I got to run. Shalom bayit. I can't go. And what happened is Moses and Aaron show up to Paro all by themselves. So you see, the men did not have the Yirat Shamayim that was necessary to go before Paro. But these two women, Shifra and Puah, Miriam and Yocheved, had the goal to tell Paro that the Jewish women are alive. There's no way we can kill the babies. Amazing. So we understand from the beginning we are told about the Yirat Shamayim of the women. And that is the key to the redemption. That's exactly what our rabbis teach us. It's either the women or it's the forefathers. Either way you go, it's not the men except for Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. So on Pesach, we tell the story, just like we tell the story of the Megillah, for there's a very simple reason. I'll give you a basic reason. The pattern that we see in Egypt for the redemption, that pattern will be repeated in the future redemption. There's a couple of reasons for that. Reason number one, because God has his way of doing things, and he does his way of doing things over and over and over again. Why does history repeat itself? Because man doesn't change? No. History repeats itself because God is in control of history, and God does not change. So we learn from history that God is in history, and God doesn't change. Therefore, history repeats itself. God is trying to send us a message. I'm involved in history. You see? Look at the patterns. That's why our rabbis, especially the Ramban, on his Perush to the Torah, he learns a lot of Ma'aseh Avot, Siman Labanim. That when we see what happens in Breshit, there are hints to what happens in Breshit that we see throughout our entire existence, especially in Shemot and the rest of the Torah. But we all look at the entire Tanakh, not just the prophecies that are talking about the future, but there are patterns within the Tanakh. And the patterns of Egypt, which is the redemption in Egypt, are exactly the same patterns that we will see in the redemption from Boca Raton. So why is it important to learn the story? Because men and women are obligated not to wait for the Mashiach, but to anticipate the coming of the Mashiach. The question, one of the three questions everybody gets asked when they get to the Shamayim, the last question is, Tzipita la Yeshua. In Hebrew, there's a word hikita, which means to wait. And there's a word tzipita, which doesn't mean to wait. What does tzipita mean in English? Anticipate. What's the difference between waiting and anticipating? I'll give you an analogy for anyone who's ever been in New York City. You know the train is coming at 12 o'clock. You look at your watch, it's 10 to 12. You know the train will be there in 10 minutes if it's on time that day, maybe before Mamdani, okay? And then, so you read the newspaper, you talk on the phone, because you know the train is going to be there at 12 o'clock. You are waiting for the train. What is a person who is anticipating the train doing? They're not looking at their watch. They're not looking at the newspaper. They're looking in the tunnel. And they're waiting to see the lights, even though the lights is not the train. The train is still a little bit far behind. But they're looking for the lights. And when they see the lights, they know what? Very, very soon the train is coming. The Haggadah is telling us the story of the redemption. That is the lights before the train. And the goal of us to learn the Haggadah story and to understand these are how we anticipate the coming of the Mashiach. Not to mention, unlike in previous I could have given this class 200 years ago and said exactly what I just said, and that would be fine. But now that we're giving the class when there happens to be the final war, which is likely the war of Gog and Magog that is going on between Iran and us and America. And if anybody reads the Tanakh, and I encourage everybody to read the Tanakh, okay? We look at Zechariah, chapter 8, 9, and 10. We look at the various places in the Tanakh that is discussing the war of Gog and Magog. This is what's going on right now. This is, again, I'm not a prophet, because anybody who says they're a prophet is a fool, is a shoteh. Baruch Hashem, I don't think I'm a shoteh, at least not yet. But that being said, not prophecy. I'm looking at prophecy. And prophecy in the Bible that's going on right now is not prophecy. It is current events. So we need to recognize this is the holiday of redemption. There were patterns that were established from the original redemption. Those patterns will repeat themselves. And that's why it's so important from the time we're young children, when we barely can speak, we're already hearing about the story of Pesach, the story of the redemption. So as we become older, as we become adults, and we're teaching our children and grandchildren, we are letting them know, by the way, this is what you look for. Because when you see these things, what does it mean? Mashiach is coming. That's called anticipation. Okay. Now, there's a lot of symbolism in the Seder. There is no way I can accomplish in 45 minutes to go through all of the symbolism of the Seder. So I'm going to try to pick on certain salient points. Okay? And of course, after 45 minutes, if people want to go, they can go, and then I can stay a little longer if there's people that want extra credit. So first is, how do we set up the Seder plate? Now, there's the regular way to set up the Seder plate, like if you look in the Maxwell House Haggadah, it'll tell you how to do it. But there's a Kabbalistic way to set up the Seder plate. And generally, the Sfaradim, unless the Kabbalah is against the Peshat, we like to set it up according to the Kabbalah. Why? Because we want to we want to have an understanding of the secrets of the Torah. Why is it so important for us to be focused on the secrets of the Torah? Who cares? It's a secret. Why do I have to know that? Well, everyone here is married. You have secrets that you share with your spouse, with your husband, yes? There are things that you tell your husband that you don't tell anybody else. There are things that you share with your husband that you don't share with anybody else. Why? Because that's a description of the connection and the love that one has for their spouse. Well, when someone shows interest in studying the secrets of the Torah, what does that mean? I want to have an intimate relationship with God. And hopefully everyone in this room wants to have an intimate relationship with God. Well, that means if we have an intimate relationship with God, therefore we want to know the secrets of the Torah. As it said, Sod Adonai Lire'av. The secrets are only told to someone who is trustworthy. Every lady in this room, given the fact that Yirat Shamayim is the backbone of the Torah and the backbone of the ladies of the Torah, certainly we see in Shmot, Yirat Shamayim is the key. That's the basis for everything. Therefore, one should be always interested in knowing what is the secrets of the Torah so we can have a very close and intimate relationship with God. So when you set up the Seder plate, whether it's you or your husband, however does it, on distribution of labor, however you do it is fine. The 3 matzot are on top. So you have the Seder plate laying flat. The 3 matzot are on top, which means on top of the Seder plate, not over the Seder plate, but on top of the Seder plate is 3 matzot. And then you have the zeroah, which is the shank bone. I know some people use a chicken, other things like that. Ideally, one should be using lamb. Why lamb? Because it, first of all, tastes a lot better than chicken. Sorry, on the guy's side, lamb is always better than chicken. Okay, but even more so, the pièce de résistance. We have a word called afikoman. Can anybody tell me what that Greek word means? It's not a Hebrew word. It can't be an English word because there was no English language in the time of the rabbis, yes, in the time of the Gemara. What does the word afikoman mean in Greek? Anyone? Who said that? Very good. It means, aringa. It means dessert. So now, of course, what is that telling us? What is the dessert of the Seder? The dessert of the Seder, unfortunately, nowadays is matzah. It's a little bit of a downer because it's matzah, okay? But if the temple is built, what is the dessert going to be? Sorry, vegetarian. Korban Pesach. Hane'echal al hasava. Or sova, depending on your nosach. What does that mean? The Korban Pesach is eaten when a person is already full. Not so full that it's disgusting, because then you've eaten too much and you're missing the mitzvah. But a person's supposed to leave some space in their intestines, in their stomach, for the dessert, which is the Korban Pesach. Why is the Korban Pesach eaten al hasava? Anyone? I can't hear. No problem. Why is Korban Pesach eaten al hasava? Very simple. There are certain rules regarding Korban Pesach. The etzem lo tishbiru bo. The animal has to be whole, which means how is it roasted? We read this last week in the Torah. Anyone who was there in Torah. Rosho al kera'av al kirbo, which means they take the spit, they stick it in the mouth of the animal, and it comes out the other end. I'm not going to mention what the other end is. Everybody should know what the other end is. And it is barbecued whole. Meaning, the goal is, from God's world, the Korban Pesach should remain whole. When it's on the table, you don't rip off a limb. Why? Because that means that the animal, you're separating the limbs. You're not allowed to do that, which means people take slices of it off the animal, and that's how they eat it. Why did God command it to be that way? Because if everybody knows, during Christmas time, when Christmas is finished, 2 or 3 weeks later, you have all the avodah zarah, the goyim, that is put out in the garbage, yes? Oh, this is a Gentile who's basically having idolatry in their house called a tree. How do we know that? Jeremiah talked about that in the Tanakh, but that's another discussion for another day. So unlike the Christians, we don't have a tree. In Egypt, we have Korban Pesach. And what happened the next morning? The Jewish people, of course, they're good people. They're going to put out their garbage. And what did they put out? An entire lamb. If you separate the bones, unless you happen to be an expert in animal physiology, is it a lamb? Is it a cow? Is it a goat? You don't know. But when you see the whole animal, bones alone, what do you know? God wanted to let the Egyptians know, not only did they sacrifice your God, they ate your God, and here it is for you to see. So Korban Pesach has to be whole. Therefore, it's ne'echal al hasava. Why? Because if a person is famished, they're going to eat quickly and potentially rip the limbs off. That is not what God wants. God wants this animal to be whole. So first, we have another type of meat at the Seder, not, of course, nowadays, but in the time of the Bet HaMikdash, called Korban Chagiga. That's the same as all the holidays. We have a sacrifice that we bring to the temple. Part goes to God, part goes to the Kohen, and part goes to the person who's bringing it. That's called Korban Chagiga. That is the meat that a person eats at the Seder. Unlike all the other holidays, there's a dessert. And dessert is the Korban Pesach. And there are unique halachot of the Korban Pesach. So that's a little bit of the symbolism. We'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So the zroa, which is on the right side, so if you have the Seder, you have the 3 matzot. The zroa is on the right side. On the left side is the betzah, the egg. Why do we have an egg? What's the symbolism of the egg? Korban Chagiga. Zecher Lamikdash. That's what the egg is for. Next, in the middle, you have something called maror. There are 5 vegetables that, according to Shulchan Aruch, qualify for maror. The best vegetable, according to the Shulchan Aruch, that qualifies for maror is hasa. Who said parsley? I didn't say. Who said parsley? No. Hasa. What is hasa? Romaine lettuce. In Hebrew, you say is a hasa. What does that mean? It's got a nice head of lettuce. Yeah, for a hair, okay? That's slang. Hasa is lettuce, specifically romaine lettuce. And now you might say, well, romaine lettuce is not bitter. Well, when you initially chew it, it's not bitter, but if you keep chewing it and you don't swallow it, it becomes bitter. That's maror. One is not supposed to suffer on Pesach. Only by Yom Kippur does it say, "V'initem et nafshotechem." And you have to have an ounce of maror to be yotzeh in the mitzvah midrabanan of maror. Forgive me. For those who have the custom to have what's called chrein, horseradish. What's the problem with horseradish? If you have an ounce, not of the beets kind, it has to be the white kind, preferably not with any other additives like vinegar and things like that. So you take the root and you grind it and you eat an ounce of that, and then you got to go to the hospital. That is not the way of the Sfaradim. We don't believe in going to the hospital. It's just not a good, it cleans your sinuses out very, very well and everything else. So the tears and but it's Pesach, it's not suffering. So again, everybody according to their custom, okay? But generally, Sfaradim have Hasa. That is the best, and it's also the best for the Ashkenazim, by the way. Unfortunately, it happened in Ashkenazi countries. Romaine lettuce wasn't easy to come by. Just finished the wintertime. There was no romaine lettuce, so they worked with whatever they had, okay? So therefore, the best, nowadays, Baruch Hashem, romaine lettuce is available. Check it for bugs or buy it pre-checked because you don't want to make avonot as you do in the mitzvah. But nevertheless, hasa, that is the maror, and that goes in the middle. Then you have the haroset, which is it goes on the right side, below the zroa, right? That's the haroset. That, of course, we know there's different ways to make it. Everybody makes it according to their custom. Generally, you want to make the haroset as an antidote to the matzah. Everybody should be very, very well aware that unless you have a glass or two of Miralax after having a lot of matzah, you end up with all kinds of other issues unless you have an iron stomach. The haroset is meant to balance the matzah from a medical point of view. So what do you make the haroset with? Things that have dates, right? Hazelnuts. That's the Sephardim. Ashkenazim use apples and whatever. That's everybody according to their custom. That is the haroset. What is the point of the haroset? The point of the haroset is to take away the bitterness of the maror. That's why we dip the maror in the haroset. We don't smear it on. We dip it to take away a little bit of the bitterness because God wants us to experience the bitterness. But once again, this is a holiday. We're not supposed to be bitter on the holiday. Then you have on the left side, below the betzah, is called the karpas. Now, of course, we're going to have a lot of opinions what the karpas is, but karpas really is one vegetable. Celery. Now, why is it celery? By the way, in the Seder, the first thing you eat is karpas. Why? Why? What does the karpas symbolize? Celery root? Okay, but what's the symbolism? That's okay. It's audience participation. What does celery represent? Anybody hear of something called ketonet pasim? What's the ketonet pasim? That's the striped coat that Yaakov Avinu made for Yosef. Incidentally, Yaakov made a coat for everyone. But the difference between Yosef's coat and everyone else's coat is Yosef's coat had stripes and everyone else's did not. The presence of the stripes was what caused the jealousy between the brothers. Why did we go to Egypt? Not a trick question. Abraham was told in the Brit B'nai Betarim that your children will be slaves in a land that is not theirs. What land belonged to the Jewish people? Nothing. That means they could have been slaves anywhere. According to the Ramban, they could have stayed in Eretz Canaan. Much better choice. Instead, they went to Egypt. Why did they go to Egypt? Because they sold their brother to Orcha Ishmaelim that's going to Mitzrayim. Oh, you sold your brother because you didn't like his dreams and you were jealous? That's why we went to Egypt. The Karpas is a very vivid reminder of how we have love for one another and not have all kinds of disputes and disagreements one to another, because we're all one family. And just like in your family, there may be people you like and there may be people you don't like. But generally, when you come over, you invite everybody in the family, yes? Well, that's the same thing we are as a Jewish nation. That doesn't mean you have to invite people you don't like to your house, but it means you have to have a good relationship or some type of relationship with everyone. Like I say, the difference between someone you like and someone you don't like is this. You say hi to everybody, you say bye to everybody. The difference is what is the amount of time between the hi and the bye. If it's somebody you don't like, hi, bye. If it's someone you do like, hi, how are you? How's everything? Blah, 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 and then bye. But everybody gets hi, the bye. That's called ahavat hinam, loving for no reason. That's the job. The Karpas reminds us of why we went to Egypt. And in fact, the reason we're still in the exile now is because Egypt is not a complete redemption. Why is it not a complete redemption? Because it was followed up by an exile. The redemption that's coming, Be'ezrat Hashem, very soon is going to be the end. It's going to be the last redemption. There's no more exile afterwards, which means we're still cleaning up the mess of Yosef being sold to Egypt. Okay? And the last one is the Hazeret. The Hazeret is on the bottom. What is the Hazeret? The Hazeret is any other one of the 5 vegetables that you use for maror. Some people use endives. That's okay. That's the Hazeret. Different customs. I'm not, but the key factor is how you set up the Seder plate. Now, why is there a Seder? Seems like a straightforward Seder. Is there a Seder on Shabbat? What's the Seder on Shabbat? You can have wine. Then some people have a little bit of some other things, right? And then they have bread. But you can adjust it. There's no requirement on Shabbat. You can, it's like Shabbat morning in Israel. Many people, what they do, they have kiddush. They have like all kinds of salads and spreads out there. They make shakol, they make borei pre adama, and then they clear the table, they make hamotzi, and then they have the meal. Yes? Am I speaking out of turn? Okay, I don't know. That's what I saw when I was in Ashdod and other places. Yes? That's what happens. So Shabbat is no seder. Generally we have wine, and then we have bread, and then we have salatim, and then we have the meal. Yes? And then dessert. That's the general. But there's no specific seder. Here, there's an order. Why is there an order on the seder? Anyone? Come on, we got about 1,000 years worth of experience here between everybody here. Why is there an order?
But it's all for what the Jews had into all this horrific thing in Egypt.
Okay, so why is there an order? I can't hear. Say that again. Kadesh, Orchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, Magid, Rochza. Why is there an order? Lama yesh seder. Not that we have a meal. Okay, so you can read the Haggadah after dinner. You can read the Haggadah before you have Kiddush. We're not answering the question. One at a time. What do you say? Okay, so why isn't there a Seder for every holiday? Why do we only have a Seder on Pesach? Can I give you the answer?
No. Everybody knows. It's Exodus.
Why is there? Here's the reason there's a Seder. You ready for this? Okay, that's very Kabbalistically. I get it. You're probably right, 100%. 100%. So, again, let's go basics. There's a Seder for one reason. The focus of the night. Ready for this? Here comes a news flash. Focus of the night is not the adults.
It's for the kids to learn.
The focus of the night is the children. And so what we want to happen is when we don't follow the usual way we do things, which is kiddush, netilat yadayim with a bracha, bread, quinoa, then we right? There's a seder that a child that grows up in a home where there's Shabbat and there's Sukkot and there's Shavuot and there's the end of Pesach, the children get accustomed to a certain routine. And here, there's a seder because we are not following the usual routine. We make kiddush. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. That's the same as everybody else. And then what do? Netilat yadayim without a beracha. What are you talking about? So a child that's astute is going to say, hello, why are we not making a bracha netilat yadayim? Okay, maybe the child is a little sleepy or whatever, he doesn't understand. Okay, maybe for some reason not making bracha today. Generally, after you make netilat yadayim with the bracha, you take bread. You're taking celery. What? When do we make netilat yadayim for eating celery? Not celery. And generally, the Seder on Rosh Hashanah is done after the Hamotzi. Again, you could do it before, but generally it's done after Hamotzi. There's a Seder on Rosh Hashanah as well, okay? That is correct. But it's a little different because it's after Hamotzi, and that's more of a custom. This is more of a din from the Gemara that we have this order, okay? So we want the children to recognize something about this night is different than every other night. What does that sound like? Ma nishtana halayla hazeh. Now, Jewish education, we learn from Pesach. I'm going to tell the educator, not that I'm going to know what you're doing, okay? The goal of education is not the teacher to do this. Wah, 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 wah. That's Charlie Brown's teacher, if anybody doesn't know. Very, very boring. Everybody sleeps. They're drooling and all that kind of stuff. A phenomenal teacher, what do? They get the children to ask questions, which means you give them something that is unusual, not routine, and you encourage them to ask questions. First of all, if you're giving a class and the students are asking questions, what does that mean? That means the material is interesting. If they're just sitting there, then it may just be that they really are off their meds or that things are not interesting. What a concept, holy moly, okay? The whole goal of the Seder is for the children to recognize that there is something different about this night. Okay, we had karpas. Now, then what do we have in the bread? It's, first of all, it's not bread, it's matzah. And then you take the misharotam, depending on your custom. And then, what do? You take the matzah. Okay, dad's taking the matzah now. Holy moly, but there's three, there's not two. That's different than every other Pesach, every other, right? And now he breaks the middle matzah, or separates the middle matzah. And then he steps away from the table, according to some customs, and says, I'm going to step outside. And then his older brother says, steal the matzah. Afi, come on. Please steal it. We're going to hide it. And then afterwards, we're going to have dad find it. And if he's too lazy to find it, what's he going to have to do? Negotiate. We're teaching children early on the concept of life and getting into business and negotiating contracts, negotiating to buy things. They need to learn early on the concept of negotiation. So, and they steal. Well, I'm going to steal the matzah? I'm not. No, we want you to steal the matzah. Oh my God, the kids, wow, I'm stealing something. That's because Mayim Ginavim Yimtaku. The whole goal is to get the children interested. One of the advice I'll give everybody here, what I used to do for my kids, is I would tell the adults, if there's questions you have, we're going to answer them afterwards. Children's questions, I give you $5 a question as long as it's not in the Haggadah. Or whatever, again, inflation. We got Biden inflation now, so it's $5 okay? But give them some reward based on their age and based on your financial ability and based on what they think is valuable for every question that they ask. Because what is that going to do? They're going to start asking questions, which is exactly the goal of the night. If you have lots of people coming over, lots of adults, that's great. But if you're not paying attention to your children, that's not great. You're better off having a smaller seder if you can't focus on too many things at the same time and focusing on the children. So that's the ke'ara, that's the seder plate. Of course, we make kiddush. There's no difference between the kiddush on Pesach, and so the beginning, the kadesh, is no different. It's the same as every other holiday. Where the changes start is when you get to urchatz. We talked about that. Then you get to karpas. That's a change. Celery, why are we taking celery? Talk about Joseph, all that kind of stuff. Then we have Yahatz, where we separate the matzah for those who lean into the Kabbalistic ways. First of all, buy soft matzah. There is a concept of soft matzah. Everybody know what soft matzah is? If you go back 300 years, 400 years ago, there was no crunchy matzah. Who made matzah for thousands of years? I'll give you a hint. It's not the men. The same people that made the bread all year long are the same people that made the matzah. Do you actually think that a woman, after she cleaned her house for hametz, is going to trust her yo-yo husband to mix flour and water in the kitchen? No way! Thank you so much. You take out the garbage. You get the Korban Pesach done. I'm taking care of the matzah. Lady, the Mishnah, the language of the Mishnah is 3 women knead dough for matzah. It specifically says women, not men. So the women made the matzah. Then we get to the magid. First, halachma anya. What does that mean? This is the bread of anya. What does anya mean? Poor. Why is the bread poor? Okay, and regular bread is mayim and kemach also, except, when some people make it, they put sugar inside. But if you go to get a pita is water. Pita has sugar inside?
I love. We have sugar, we have oil, and we have everything.
All right, well, okay, so sugar. All right, well, there's not supposed to be sugar in matzah. We know that, right? Okay.
There's no sugar.
So why is it called anya? First of all, it doesn't rise. That's one. Number two, we were given matzah in Egypt. Why? Because matzah is very filling. You have a small amount and it's filling because as soon as it gets into the stomach, it fills up. So if you want to feed the slaves, you don't give them a lot of stuff. You give them something like this. Anya also means la'anot. What is la'anot? No, I didn't say la'anot. I said le'anot. There's a difference between anenu and anenu. Anenu is answer us. Anenu is make us suffer. Lechem oni, meaning the bread that we answer questions with. Halachma anya. This is the bread that the children are going to ask questions and we are going to answer those questions. Halachma anya. Okay? Now, go to the manishtana, which is the next thing. Of course, there's different seder. The Ashkenazim have one way they order. Sfaradim have a different order. The Ashkenazim go according to importance. The Sfaradim go according to what's produced first. They go in order of how it's produced. Whatever your custom is better. Now, very important halacha for the seder. Shulchan Aruch says we start the seder miyad shetechshach. I'll translate. Immediately at Tzet HaKochavim. Tzet HaKochavim, which means star rise, is generally 18 minutes after sunset. Meaning, that's not the time for a drasha in the Bet Knesset. That's the time you want to start shul early. Erev Pesach is when you start mincha early. You pray Arabit early. So everybody gets home and they're able to start the Seder at the star rise, which is 18 minutes after. Now, I challenge anyone over here. Does your husband get home 18? Are you ready to start the Seder 18 minutes after sunset? Well, then we need to talk to the administration of the Sephardic Minyan and tell them that is not the Shulchan Aruch.
They also need to pray Hallel.
So start earlier. Seder should start 18 minutes after sunset. I could look up sunset on that day.
I would say 8 o'clock.
Yeah, a little after.
Even before.
And why do you want to start the Seder as quickly as possible?
To eat that Fikoman on time.
So you have to
No, how 3 hours, 4 hours to Chatzot is 1:30.
That you have to finish.
No.
So the children are awake.
Yeah, because it's exhausting.
You're supposed to let the children take a nap, whatever they got to do during the day. We want the children awake for as much of the Seder as possible, preferably up until the Afikoman if possible. Okay? Why? Because we want them to understand the entire picture of the redemption. We want them to get a picture of it. Therefore, we start the Seder immediately. It's not the time to say, okay, we're going to get a half an hour, we're going to relax. No. Start the Seder miyad, immediately. How much time is miyad? How do we know it's 18 minutes? The gematria ketana of the word miyad is 18. Mem is 4, Yod is 10, and Dalet is 4. Altogether, 18. Matzah has to be made miyad, 18 minutes. We see the pattern here? Just like the matzah's miyad, we start the Seder miyad. And there's another reason. Because the Torah says, Bechipazon yatzatem mitzrayim. What does chipazon mean? This is not the time for Sephardic time. This is the time for Yeki time. On time, not late, fast. That's Rat Hashem.
For the men.
Okay, one more thing we'll talk about, and then we'll call it for the evening, unless someone wants to stay a little later. Okay? We have a story in the Haggadah. Actually, I want to say 2 more things. Forgive me. Story in the Haggadah of 5 rabbis that stayed up all night long telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. One of them was Rabbi Akiva, yes? Now, did they not do Afikoman until did the Magid go all night long? No. So basically, the Haggadah is telling us a very important story. The Magid also, there's no reason to stretch it out. Once again, we want the children awake for as much of the Seder as possible. Generally, the Sfaradim sing the Haggadah. We don't say it. We sing it. Ma nishtana halayla amar Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah hare ani keben 70 shana. We sing the Haggadah. This is excitement. This is something we're supposed to be enthusiastic about. But we go through it in 45 minutes to an hour. If the children are asking questions, fine. But 45 minutes to an hour. And then you get to the meal, you get to the Afikoman, and then if the adults want to be Chasidah Kadisha, like Rabbi Akiva and his team, and talk all night long, as soon as you finish Shir HaShirim, they can go on all night long until Kriyat Shema, until Vatikir in the morning. Now, 3 things I just want to discuss quickly, and then we'll finish up. There are 3 essential parts of the Seder of the Magid that must be mentioned. And if they are not mentioned, Lo yatsa yedei hova. Are women obligated to hear the Haggadah? Yes, that's correct. 100%. Now, I know sometimes we're worried about the lunch, the dinner, what's going on. You go into the kitchen, you check things out. But there's a time when we stop that. We come back to the Seder. We park our, first of all, the wine, there's an obligation from women just like men, no difference. Egalitarian, which means 3.8 ounces of wine. Don't get a big cup if you can't handle your wine. Get a small cup and have most of it, okay? Leaning, be careful what's leaning. If you don't lean, you got to do it again, okay? But that also includes the ladies. So 3 things. So when you get to those 3 things, we make sure that everybody is there. So if the women in the kitchen making sure everything's fine, hello, yalla, come back, okay? Pesach, matzah, umaror. Now, I said before that the whole Seder is teaching us about Jewish education. Jewish education, what is the most important question to be answering for children? How? No. What? No. Where? No. When? No. The most important question to be answering is why? Now, why is it, I'm going to ask a why question, why is it that sometimes when students ask a teacher a why question, the teacher says, because that's what it says in the Torah? You know why that is? Because the teacher doesn't know the answer to the why question. If a why question is very reasonable. Now, when the Haggadah says, Pesach shehayu avotenu ochlim bizman shebeit hamikdash kayam al shum ma, what does that mean? What question is the Haggadah asking? Why? Is the answer the rabbis give because it says so in the Torah? Did you forget you read it last week? Moron? No. The rabbis give an answer, which means when a why question is asked, there are 2 options for a parent or a student. Either to say, that's a great question, I'm going to look it up and get back to you, or to give them the answer to the why question, not because God says so. That's not an answer to the why question, as we see in the Haggadah. When we have Manishtana halayla hazeh, it means why is this night? Do we say because God said so? No. We say the answer differently, yes? So why do we have Pesach? Huh? Here's the answer. Al shum shepasach hakadosh baruch hu al batei avotenu b'Mitzrayim. So what is the Pesach telling me? It's called Pesach. Why is it called Pesach? Shepasach. When we refer to the holiday, we call it Hag Pesach. We're praising God for him passing over our houses. When God refers to the holiday, what does he call it? Hag Matzot. Why? Because he's praising Klal Yisrael for the matzot. Understand the relationship? So the Pesach is why? It's to tell you a very important lesson, which should be conveyed at the Seder every single year. You are special. You know why you're special? Because you're a Jew. That makes you special. It doesn't mean that everybody else is not special. They're special too. But we are extra special. Why? Because God picked us. He didn't pick the 7.8 billion other people in the world. He picked us. The Pesach teaches us that we are special. And if we're special, that means we need to do what we can to make sure that we maintain that specialty with our children and our grandchildren. No shiksas. Okay, keeping on. Next. Matzah zo she'anachnu ochlim al shum ma. The answer? Because God said so. That's not what it says in the Haggadah. What does it say in the Haggadah? Al shum shelo hispik betzekam el shel avotenu lachmitz. Ad shenigla alehem melech ma'achei hakadosh baruch hu u'alam miyad. Now, did the Jewish people know they were leaving Egypt that night? Absolutely. They had their bags packed. They knew from Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's it. They had their bags packed. What's going on here? What's going on here? They had their bags packed. Why was it so shocking? Because it happened so quickly. It happened so quickly. Remember, when did Makat Bechorot happen? Exactly midnight. When did Paro come running personally in the streets of Goshen and say, Kumu tzi'u mitoch ami, within 18 minutes of his son getting killed? That's called miyad, which means we learn that the redemption can happen beheref ayin, with the blink of an eye in 18 minutes. Now, did we leave in the middle of the night? No. No, we waited until sunrise. Very simple. Why did we wait till sunrise? Because we wanted it on YouTube. We wanted to make sure that everybody knew we're not stealing away like we just got away, that Paro might change his mind. No, we're saying, thank you, Pharaoh, for setting us free. We're not going to leave right now. We're going to wait until the morning, and that's when we're going to leave. So everybody sees, so everybody knows this is when we're leaving. We're not leaving as slaves. We're leaving as slaves to God, not slaves to you. And we really never were slaves to you. We're always slaves to God, even though you thought we were slaves to you. The Matzah tells us the redemption can happen immediately. There's a concept called kfitzat haderech. What does that mean? We think it means we jump and we go someplace. No, we jump and the earth revolves and we're in a different place. That's called kfitzat haderech, which means it's possible on the Seder night, we're going to jump up and suddenly be in Jerusalem. 6 hours, 18 minutes. Even El Al's not that fast. Even if you include the fact that you have to wait 4 hours before and all that kind of 18 minutes, which means you can be in Jerusalem in 18 minutes. Yonatan ben Uziel says on his Perush on the Torah, you are going to be coming to me on Kanfei Nesharim. He says they immediately did the Korban Pesach on Leil Seder in Jerusalem. And then Hashem brought them back, which means they were transported miyad. Okay? And the last piece is the maror. The maror shall not shuma. Once again, it doesn't say because God said so. That's not what it says. What's the message that's conveyed? It's not easy to be a Jew. Every lady in this room, when it comes time for the Seder, you're going to say to yourself, oh my God, I can't believe I got here. It's really not easy to be a Jew, okay? The message of the Maror is, I never promised you a rose garden. I said you were special. I said the redemption will happen immediately, but guess what? Sometimes it's tough going. The Maror teaches us what? That sometimes it's tough. It's not always going to be easy. That's the message of the Maror. Those are the three messages. That's the essential part of the Magid. The rabbis are telling us, if we haven't communicated Pesach, Matzah, Maror, and the symbolism, we have not fulfilled our mission at the Seder. Be'ezrat Hashem, you should all have Chag Kasher v'Sameach. Enjoy a Seder. That's just a little B'Yerushalayim. And you know what? If not the Seder is not in Jerusalem, the next morning we'll be in Jerusalem, okay? All right. Baruch Adonai l'olam, amen ve'amen.